Okay, so this video is all about animal tracking and less so the details and specifics of tracks and how to ID, and more just getting inspiration of why would you even bother learning animal tracking as a skill. Yeah, the uses, the practicality, the curiosity, the deepening of your ability to connect with the natural world through this skill, and just providing some of our insight of why we engage in animal tracking and on different forms and levels, and yeah, why we do it, why we value it, and why we teach it. So I guess I'll start with when I first started learning animal tracks, I realized how many signs in a forest that I totally missed. Um, yeah, just in general. So animal tracking is not only the physical print. You can have scat, you can have vegetable or plant um, like changes from animals. You can have what else?
Landscape changes, paths, trails,
Yeah,
um,
trailing, like markings on trees. I guess that kind of ties into animal, but like, yeah, just like markings in general. It could be scent markings as well. um yeah, and they can be anything as small to from like, little ant pathways and dens or mouse dens to like massive moose antler rubs. It could be finding bones, it could be finding
carcasses,
carcass, yeah,
fur, uh, anything. Their
anything,
food
yeah.
sources, their dens,
Mm-hmm.
nests. Uh, yeah, so many different ways to locate signs of animals and what they're doing on the landscape.
So when I first learned, one thing that just captivated my attention and for me provided really good reason to start developing the skill was realizing that tracking is essentially the original scientific method of our minds as humans, evolving now as humans. So in order to survive, we had to have the ability to observe patterns in nature, which is what tracking is you're observing various patterns in different contexts over a period of time, and you're coming to conclusions. Those conclusions, there is still always an element of unknown because unless you physically saw the animal poop or the animal make that track, there's always an element of unknown. But the more you developed your pattern recognition, your ability to link and connect all different types of information inputs, that's what helps you become more confident as a tracker and have um, not only just confidence, but the higher probability of what you're seeing and then determining to be true is actually what is happening on the landscape.
What are some reasons you think that this is practical in, let's say, hiking, through hiking, camping, hunting, foraging? Let's say, for example, like knowing where the different food sources are. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're birding and you want to observe different types of uh, birds, something like knowing these pin cherries right here. Okay, this might be an area we scope out for birds, or knowing where the blueberries are might be a place you go looking to see bears if you're a photographer, or a
Mm-hmm.
hunter, or a trapper or forager.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some other practical reasons we might want to know?
Yeah, I think you touched on some of it. So hunting, of course, is one. If you want to hunt deer, you have to become deer to be able to hunt. I think people think that hunting is like very easy and comes very quick to people. And yes, of course, there's probably the exception with location and your lineage and maybe just who you are and your natural gifts. But generally, people have to learn hunting as a skill, and tracking is, of course, part of that because you decrease your amount of time hunting if you understand where the animals roam, which comes from adding that lens of tracking. Like Jeff said, photography, if you want to see more animals, understanding animal tracks allows you to be able to find more rare animals. A lot of people want to see, the rare birds, the moose, or like, all different types of even just like animal interactions, but like between one and another. So if you learn how to track on a landscape, then you'll have signs that aren't, the physical animal, and then you can come sit there, stay there, and then have those interactions happen. Because if you just go to an area and you do the same thing, and there's no sign of any animal activity there, then you're just wasting your time in some ways. Another one would be fear. So people, you know, see tracks and they get super scared of what the track is because they don't even know the track or what animal that is, or the is that animal just like walking quietly and calmly, or is that animal on the loose? When you understand tracking patterns and gait patterns, you can understand like, oh, that animal was like in distress, or that animal was very relaxed, and you can track that in humans as well. But a good example of that would be, we have a pretty big dog, and yesterday by the river, our dog made these tracks by the edge, and we were joking that like someone could come here and think that those are wolf tracks because they're big, and it's our dog. And so understanding, okay, well, what is actually the difference between a wolf track and a domestic dog? And that someone could come to that riverbank and totally go into a state of fear thinking that that was a wolf. But if they had the knowledge of, you know, again, it could be pattern, it could be substrate and how the track is registering, all of these things, that hopefully you learn in the future, is it can decrease your fear in nature. And also it's really fun. I think people, we talk about deepening your connection to nature, and animals, like plants, they don't move, as quickly anyway as animals, and they're in some ways easier to teach because there's a lot more subtlety and um, intricacies that come with tracking animals, and it's also a skill of decreasing your vibration on the landscape so you can see more. So oftentimes, even us, when we see uh, like muskrats or more rare animals, it's really nice to see them because we don't always get to see like these different families. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to add to some of the practicality, if we think of a holistic view of nature, knowing, for example, if we're on a shoreline and we see perhaps a raccoon, or we see an otter, or we see different types of tracks, turtle, that's all going to tell us what is in that lake ecosystem. So we'll know
Mm-hmm.
this certain fish because certain mammals or rodents are going to need certain types of food. So just by seeing animal track or seeing the fur in the forest, like just carcasses, all these things are going to tell us different pieces about the environment of where we are. For example, you can't tell from this side of the forest that we're on now, but on the other side of the forest behind the camera is a lot of old pine, tall pines with a lot of old man's beard, lots of different mosses and lichen. And so we know this is going to be a moose territory, or our likeliness of seeing moose or tracking moose is going to be much higher. So just knowing the environment and what different plant life, fungi, the other creatures, chipmunks, birds, hawks, vultures, crows, bears, like all these things are going to tell us different things about the landscape that we need to know, that will give us clues to other things, because it's a big web and it's
Mm-hmm.
all interconnected. So
Mm-hmm.
knowing if you see a butterfly out here, we and say it's a monarch, we're going to know that there's some type of food that the monarch feeds on, and it uh, could be a tool making plant, or it could be something for making
Cool.
cordage or perhaps medicine. And then seeing other types of animals is going to be a given that, okay, there's maybe a food source that we could eat,
Mm-hmm.
or perhaps there's some type of medicine source that we didn't know was out here, just by touching into the clues of knowing, okay, what web does the chipmunk interact in, and what web does this certain bird interact in, and okay, what this big megafauna, what kind of habitat does he need, and then just knowing all these little things and how they all interact together, little things that you might not think of just seeing a patch of fur on the ground, or one track, or a certain plant, or a certain tree,
Mm-hmm.
even a certain type of trail, a
Mm-hmm.
certain type of scat. It could tell you so much about the potential of the place that you're in, that it's so much more than just seeing one thing and then leaving one clue. It kind of opens up the possibilities, and and teaches you more and more. It's almost like reading the back of the book can tell you a lot about the book, as opposed to just looking at the cover. Like, we're looking at these little clues, and it's telling us like so much stuff that if we read further into it, we can learn a whole lot more about what possibly lay out there if we look to discover more.
And I think what Jeff mentioned is like it's a web, and to fully understand the web, whatever your interest is, you need to understand all aspects, all pieces that's building this, yeah, this web of interconnections between plants, animals, us, the weather systems. And so oftentimes what we see is people who show up and they're like, they just love plants and they don't care about the tracking. But I would argue that you can have an even deeper connection to the plant if you understand the plant animal interaction. And so just being open, if it's something new to you, a skill that's totally new to you, it's really, really fun. Once you start breaking through the initial barrier, because you're probably, your learning curve at the beginning, just like mine was pretty steep, and I realized how much I really didn't know. um, and I assumed that these very common prints I would feel confident IDing, and then once they were beside lookalike prints, I got confused. So just being humble and excited and curious about learning a new skill, and yeah, just like going from a starting point for you. What draws you in? Is there something that we said that's like maybe that's your starting point? Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
whether it's learning these tracks for lost proofing, to you know knowing certain tracks might lead you back to civilization
Mm-hmm.
by knowing these clues in this web. So just preventing yourself from getting lost. Or herbalism, if you
Yeah.
want to touch into herbalism, knowing the tracks, knowing what the animals you're going to eat. If we see rabbit, or different tracks, or different signs, let's say, of these animals, we know, like, okay, if we go this way, we're likely to find this.
And also trailing is really fun, especially if you have like more of the adventurous spirit. So what it would be is you would come across a game trail and you would follow it either forward or backwards depending on what you're trying to find, if you're trying to find the animal or the den. And you can really get lost in some ways through tracks. And there's so many different ways to connect with it without even seeing the animal or getting really into like the details of a print. So hopefully there was something there to spark your tracking mind, tracking inspiration, and yeah, just go out there, open your lens of awareness, and see what you can find.